Hello friends, come with me on a prayer walk to talk about Genesis chapter 13. Somebody yesterday asked me what a prayer walk is, and it actually got me to thinking that could actually be confusing to somebody. So my interpretation of a prayer walk is literally going and focusing on nothing but hearing from the Lord and spending time with the Lord. Sometimes for me that does look like listening to scripture and then just pausing it and allowing Him to speak through it, and then sometimes it looks like hearing from God and sharing with you guys, and then sometimes it looks like me talking His ear off the whole time with nothing else going on except maybe some ambient worship music or something, because I feel overstimulated and like I really just need Him to listen. Also, if I'm out of breath, this is my very first day wearing my weighted vest that I just got, so y'all just bear with me on that. Baby girl's got her sewing machine going. She's fed and almost kind of happy, and never mind. So chapter 13 in the book of Genesis is where we learn that Abram and Lot separate. They had to leave Egypt because, you know, Abram lied to Pharaoh and said that Sarah was his sister and told a half-truth and didn't tell him the whole truth and didn't tell him that he was his wife, so Pharaoh kicked him out. And in verse 4 it says something interesting. It says they go back to where Abram had made an altar to the Lord at first, a place of worship, a place of prayer, a place of thanksgiving, a place of acknowledgement to the Lord. And that verse kind of stopped me in my track in today's reading, and it made me think like, when we go wayward, when we think that we've messed things up, when we think that we've gone our own way, when we really meddle in what God has told us to do and what He's got going on for our lives, like, maybe we need to step back and go back to the place where we thanked Him and praised Him and worshiped Him the last time. There was this time me and my sister were talking about some plans that she had and a crossroad that she had kind of come to in her life. And she had talked to a friend about two different decisions, both that could honor the Lord. And she was like, I'm just having a really hard time with this because I feel like God's not telling me what He wants me to do. And her friend said something, and she relayed it to me that really impacted my life. And it was this: if God's not currently speaking into your situation, go back to the last thing that He told you and be obedient in that thing. And this verse just kind of brought that back to my memory. Like, go back to the first things. Go back to the first things. Go back to the first love. Go back to praising and worshiping Him. Go back to where you found to be thankful for Him at first. Like, go back to that place. Go back to that place, not maybe physically, but mentally. Like, go back to that place mentally where you worshiped Him and realized that He is Lord. Whew, you wouldn't think 8 pounds would make that big of a difference, but Mama's struggling right now. So then we know that Abram had a lot of stuff, and so did Lot. And their people started arguing with each other because they were running out of space and it was getting cramped, and they were running out of room and out of field for all of the things that they had. And not only that, but this is the land that God had promised to Abram, and the Canaanites and the Perizzites maybe are still in the land. So they're all there. It's really tight quarters. And Abram looks at Lot and says, like, let there be no strife between you and me, between all of our people. Like, let there be no hard feelings. We gotta separate. You know, it doesn't have to even be for negative reasons or for catastrophic reasons, but God will remove people from your life who don't need to be in that close of proximity to you for a purpose. I mean, Abram and Lot were family, like you would think. Dwelling together, yeah. Like, Abram's already left his father's land. He's already left his comfort zone. He's already left his native land. Like, why wouldn't they stay together, you know? Because Lot's going to defend his people because they work for him, and Abram's going to defend his people because they work for him. And they were running out of resources in the land because God hadn't removed the people who had inhabited it before they got there yet, even though it was promised to Abram. And so the reason why God allowed the separation between Abram and Lot, it wasn't for some like catastrophic blow up in the face reason. It was more productive for the time that they were in for them to be separated. And actually, some crazy things came out of that when you look at Lot and the piece of land that he chose to take. But you know, when God prunes people out of your life, even if it's just for a season, even if you love them, even if you feel like they are so close to you, don't look at God and say, you know, you're not a good God for doing that. So people come and go in your life for all different reasons. And, you know, one of the things that we have to grow in is to let them. God is sovereign over that too. God is working for good in that too. It also made me think, like, I wonder if there was a time, this isn't in the Bible, but I wonder if there was a time where Abram got bitter and said, I would rather Lot have stayed and the Canaanites and the Perizzites leave. How many times does that sound like me in my own life, or maybe you in your own life? Like, we look around at the other people that God could have removed instead of the ones that he did, and we think, like, why did they have to stay and the others leave? Again, God is so sovereign over it. Let him work for good in it. Let him keep his promises for you. Let him work his purposes out for you. Don't give the enemy a seat at your table. And then I think this was an act of faith on Abram's part, but he let Lot choose the land first. Maybe it was love for Lot. Maybe he was just trying to keep the peace. Maybe it was a great act of faith. Maybe it was a combination of all three. But he let Lot look around and choose which portion of the land he wanted to go to. You know, if Abram, I feel like, would have been acting in his flesh and would have been acting in his self-righteousness, I feel like he would have been like, hey, God's already promised this to me. Like, God's already made me a promise that he's going to do all these things. He's going to bless me. Like, I'm going to have the greatest. I'm going to be the greatest. I'm going to this, that, and the other. And so I'm going to choose first. Like, instead of trusting God to be sovereign over Lot's choice too, Abram could have said, because God spoke to me and said that I was the one that was going to be blessed and bless the nations and be as many as the grains of all of this, like all of this dust of the earth, like that's my descendants. Like I am going to choose first. Hey, let me tell you something. There's something to be said about trusting God and being humble. Just because God spoke a purpose and a calling over your life doesn't mean that you're better than anybody else, because he has purpose and calling for theirs too. And it's really cool how when we get out of the way and we step back and let God be God, how he works things out in ways we can't even imagine, because it looked like God got the better deal. Lot, not God. God always gets the better deal. But it looked like Lot got the better deal. He got the well-watered plains. He got the flourishing land. He got the beauty and the splendor. But he also got the sin. You know, the world can offer you a lot. The world can look really great. It can look like the well-watered plains. It can look like flourishing. It can look like everything you've ever wanted. And in your flesh, it is everything you've ever wanted. But I can tell you this, when God looks at it, he sees tainted with sin, which means that God isn't in it, because he can't be. He's too holy to reside in what the world's got going on. His purpose for you is greater than the empty promises of the world. See, Abram might not have looked like he got the better deal, but what he got was the promises of God. And what Lot got was Sodom, which was tainted with sin. It might have looked better on the outside, but there was purpose in where Abram was going because God was there. And Lot went the way of sin, which is not where God is, not in his love. God calls us out of sin and into his love so that we can reside in his holiness and in his glory and in his righteousness and in his promise for you, in his goodness for you, in the good plans that he has for you, and his purpose for you, so that we can bring him glory. Then God gave Abram another piece of the promise, another piece of the promise puzzle. He told him all of these things that were about to take place. He says, I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth. And he says, arise and walk the length and the breadth of the land, and I will give it to you. But I need to remind you, in chapter 12, in the first part of chapter 12, it's not just so that Abraham will be blessed. It's so that through Abram's blessing from God, that he will be a blessing to those who come after him and to those that are around him. And you know, we've kind of read through Genesis chapter 12 and chapter 13, but it doesn't tell us how long it took from God telling Abram to go to him showing him the land he was actually going to give him. Because remember, God told Abram to go, And he said, I will show you the land that I will give you in chapter 12. And now here he is. Remember, there was a famine in the land. This hasn't been an easy journey. There was a famine. Now he's had to separate from Lot. Now there's all of this thing that has taken place. He's gone to Egypt. He's come back to the place where he first built the altar. There's a lot that's taken place before God says, this is it. This is the land. This is the land I told you I would show you. Here it is. The journey is a part of the process, friend. The journey is a part of the process. It's a part of the preparation to get you to the palace that God has prepared for you, to the promise that God has prepared for you. It wasn't easy for him, and it's not going to be easy for you. There may be some people inhabiting your land right now. There may be people walking with you that are not going to be walking with you when God gets you there. You may experience drought and famine along the way. You may meddle in God's stuff that he's got going on for you and mess up, and God needs to fix that. And I'm going to tell you, just because God has shown Abram a piece of the puzzle doesn't mean that he's finished yet. No, they're just getting started. He's still not finished yet. Thousands of years later, he's still not finished yet. But I can promise you his timing is greater, and his plan is greater, and his purpose is greater, and his will is greater. And as a last minute reminder, don't compare your journey to anybody else's, because just because God's using them in a different way or called them to a different thing that he's called you to, I can tell you, friend, God's not going to deliver your mail to their house. He's not going to reassign your purpose if you're walking in truth and faith and in purpose towards him. If you want to be used by God, friend, I'm telling you, buckle up, because he will use you. You're going to have to crucify that flesh every single day. And that's going to change as you walk through your life. The things you have to lay down to walk in the purpose that God's called you to walk in, it's going to look different every single season of your life. The things that tempt you, they're going to change. They're going to shift, and you're going to have to be aware of that. You're going to have to hate your sin to walk in your sanctification. What's sown in the flesh will reap in the flesh, but what's sown in the spirit will reap in the spirit. Don't let your flesh get in the way. Don't let your flesh get in the way in either the time or the thing that God's called you to do. You got to know that he's greater. You got to know that he's better. You got to know that what the world promises may look bright and shiny, but on the other side of it is tainted with sin, and it's going to leave you more empty than you could ever imagine. You have a hole that only the Spirit can fill. You have a purpose that only God can lead you to. You have a plan for your life that only God can walk you in. And friend, he loves you so much. He loves you so much. He sees the valleys. He sees the famine. He sees the drought. He sees the hurt from the separation. He sees the longing to be back with those people that you had to separate from. He sees you in the morning when you're crying tears of either joy or pain. He sees you when you walk through seasons when you think he's not there. He sees you when you think that you're gonna make a better decision on your own than he could do. Just trust him with his plan for your life. And I'm speaking to myself too. Just trust him with it. Stop trying to fulfill it on your own, because I promise you, when the Bible says he's got you, he's got you. He's already gone before you and made the way. And now he's going with you. Isn't that cool? That's our God. And no matter what you face along the way, it will always, always, always be for our good and for his glory.